Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative, Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day." Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Hey there, welcome back to the Ruth podcast. I'm here with Jen and Justin. We're having a great time. We are nearly done with this. This is episode 5, part 5, and we are headed into chapter 4. We are going to resolve the most amount of tension. We're going to solve the problem here.
That's right.
I cannot wait. I love this chapter. So just a reminder, if you haven't read chapter 4 yet, pause this, go listen or read that, and use your guide because it will help you get the most out of this chapter of understanding what's going on and also thinking about your life in some of the same terms. So go do that and then come join us. Here we are, guys, back with now Boaz. Chapter starts off with Boaz. The man will not rest until it is settled. The ball is officially in his court.
That's right.
Very much in his. And now he takes the ball and goes to the city gate.
That's right.
So let's talk about this interaction. He's at the city gate, and a dude happens to come by.
That's right. Yeah. It's another big moment of sovereign serendipity. I mean, the verse 1 of chapter 4 there, and behold. So Boaz gets there. He sits at the city gate, and behold,
Wouldn't you know it?
And there he was, So it's like we don't know how long it's going to take. I mean, there's not emails or, little invites that you can send out to people. There's none of that. So he's just got to wait until he bumps into all the people he needs. So who's he need? He needs the guy. He needs the city elders. which who knows how many of them there would have been, 7 to 12 maybe,
Yeah.
who
Okay.
knows. So he needs all the city elders there to be present and witness
Mm-hmm.
this. And then he needs a crowd to stick around and watch the whole thing.
We need the witnesses.
That's right. So how long is all this going to take? It's like, we don't know. And then Ruth 4 is like, we'll kind of get this
We'll speed
thing
it up for
along.
you.
Yeah. So sovereign serendipity, he sits at the city gate and boom, there's the guy.
There's our guy. Is there any sense in which this is a small town? Maybe news is traveling fast. So as Boaz showed up to the gate, people were like, oh,
they're waiting to
something's
watch
going
this.
down now.
That's right. It's like old Western, as you walk
Like,
in. Yeah,
what? He shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of people ask too about the city gate. Like, what's the significance of the city
Mhm.
gate?
Yeah.
It's just where business happened. It's like
Yeah.
it's where judgment was done. In a lot of bigger towns, they actually had a judge's seat built into the wall of the city gate
Wow.
where the judge would sit and hear out cases. It was one of the places where you'd get the most witnesses to stop and watch and see justice being done.
Okay.
So that's why the city gate's important here is Boaz is it's right up in front of everybody. We're going to take care of
Yeah.
this business. We're going to do it quickly. And yeah,
And we're going to do it right.
that's
Yeah.
right.
And so here comes our guy. And he
That's right.
says, hey, friend, come over here. And we,
Yeah.
in a book that has names for everyone, I mean, we know everyone's name.
Yeah.
This guy is mysteriously anonymous.
Yeah,
He
he-
has dialogue and everything, but we don't know this guy.
Yeah, yeah. He actually has a name. Like Boaz calls him friend. In Hebrew, it's Poloni Almoni. And that's kind of his, it's kind of his name.
Poloni Almoni.
Poloni Almoni. And all it means is Mr. So-and-so or Mr. No Name. And there's something important there with that. In Hebrew culture, one of the ways that you punish someone for not doing what they're supposed to do is you name shame them. You just
Name shame.
It's like we're not going to mention any names, but this guy here didn't do what he was supposed to. You see it in Exodus. It's like, who's the Pharaoh that tried to kill the Hebrew baby boys? It's like, I don't know, because the Exodus is like, it's not, his name isn't important. He's so against God that his name's not important, but we know the names of the midwives because they did what they were supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of Hebrew literature here where in Ruth it's like this guy doesn't do what he's supposed to, as we'll see. And so as punishment, the author's just like, I'm not even going to tell you what his name was. His name doesn't matter.
He's
They're
the
not
one we
important.
don't speak of.
That's right.
we
Mr.
don't say
He
his
who
name.
must not be named.
He who must not be named
Yeah.
came by.
That's
We
right.
didn't even say his name.
That's right.
Phony baloney or whatever it was. That guy.
I like that version better. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
like
like
that.
So Phony baloney came by and Boaz
Yeah.
wants to talk to him.
The
and
Lindsay
makes the
Schott
offer.
Study Bible that will be coming out 10 years from now, there will be a footnote. Could be translated phony baloney.
Phony
Yeah,
baloney.
I
Just
like
keep
it.
that in mind.
Yes.
These are the gems you'll get from me. Phony baloney. So Phony baloney and Boaz have a conversation.
Yeah.
And here we go. He tells him there is a parcel of land that belonged to Elimelech. Let's get some business done.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
He makes him the offer.
Yeah. Yeah. He tells him. He just calls him to his duty. And Boaz is very wise and strategic. Like this is a wise as serpents moment.
Okay.
He wants to highlight the character of this man in front of everybody because Boaz knows he's the best redeemer that Ruth could have, and he's about to prove why. So he tells him there's a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I'd tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. He didn't say anything about Ruth.
No.
Completely leaves Ruth out. And while the guy thinks it's just buying land, he's like, I'll
So
redeem it.
sweet.
I'm
in.
I'm in. I'll
More
totally
land?
buy it. He says,
Yeah.
I will redeem
Love
it.
it.
And then Boaz pulls a bait and switch. Okay, well, if you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. And then the guy's like, I'm out.
Nah, I'm out.
I'm not doing that. Which it's revealing his character
Yeah.
here. When he thought that he would be the beneficiary of wealth, he was totally in. But when he realized he had to be a benefactor, he was out.
Yeah.
It was all about what I could get, not what I can give. He wanted to increase his inheritance, his land, but perpetuating the inheritance of someone else, he was out on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, essentially what the Redeemer is going to do here is he's going to buy Elimelech's land. He's going to marry Ruth the Moabite, and he's going to perpetuate Elimelech's name, not his own. He's going to platform Elimelech saying. That's the whole goal here, is that
Wow.
Elimelech will not be forgotten to
Right.
history, but his
Mhm.
inheritance will continue. And when he has a son with Ruth, that son becomes Elimelech's heir
Mm-hmm.
and receives what belongs to Elimelech, which is why Naomi takes Obed as her own.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in it for the Redeemer, so to speak.
Mm.
It's not his inheritance. Even if he buys it, it doesn't become his.
Yeah.
It belongs to his son,
Mhm.
who is the true heir of Elimelech. When the guy realizes that it's not going to be his, like as long as it's just buying land that he can increase his property,
Mhm.
he's all fine with that. But the moment that there's skin in the game
There's
and he's not
sacrifice,
going to
yeah.
benefit, yeah, he's out.
He's
And
totally
there's
out.
a big important here. The truest redeemers are the ones that sacrifice. The truest redeemers
Mhm.
are the one that steps into situations that are not theirs to step into, but they take the burden
Right.
with no benefit to themselves.
Yeah.
So again, another picture of Jesus
Right.
in this moment, you know.
Him, like, I'm just thinking of us being called co-heirs with him and him
Mhm.
securing an inheritance for us, that it's like, well, I
Yeah.
have no right to share in the inheritance of Jesus. And yet he's like,
Right.
no, I want it and I'll share that with you.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to secure it for you. It's
Yeah.
actually unshakable, unperishing, and from First
Mhm.
Peter, that's what he's doing for us.
I think it's really good just when you're thinking about Bible skills and working through the Bible. On one of the areas of their guide, they're plotting how this works. And if you'll go slow enough to keep plotting, you'll catch these moments of like, we were going this direction, and then you said Boaz switches it. And it's
Yeah.
like, so these are the reasons these tools are so
Mhm.
helpful when you like
Right.
to go slow in these narratives of like thinking about characters, thinking
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
plot. And just because you can't catch every Hebrew
Mhm.
double meaning or all the
Right.
things,
Right.
like as you start to go, you can catch that like,
Mhm.
oh wait,
Yeah.
we just had a
There is
moment
a
there.
plot twist right then
Yeah.
that
But if
happened
you
that I
read it
wasn't seeing.
fast, you miss the like just
Totally.
the picturing of it
Yeah.
and stuff. So I think it's just helpful to
And
when you attack a narrative to just
Yeah.
really think through that, because it's happening
right.
all the time.
Right. And just as a basic rule of thumb, we never read a book of the Bible just to read that book of the Bible. We're reading
Mm.
the book of the Bible to see how it contributes to the big story.
Mm.
And one of the reasons we know for sure Ruth was written, according to Paul, was it was written to make us wise for salvation through faith in Jesus. So Ruth is here to show us something about Goel redeemers that's going to teach us about Jesus. And what he does in this contrast is showing that there are some potential redeemers
Mm.
that will be out the moment, like this guy says in verse 6 here, I can't do it lest I impair my own inheritance.
Mhm.
He's like, it's going to cost me too much, and I'm not going to do anything that's going to cost me anything.
Right.
Boaz, though, it's like, I don't care what it costs. And immediately you begin to see that redeemers that model God the best are the redeemers that are sacrificial. And you immediately hear echoes of a future redeemer. You begin to see a trajectory towards a future redeemer who, though he was rich, became poor,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
He who knew no sin became sin. I mean, there's a redemption always comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always comes at a cost. And it comes at the cost of the redeemer.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you find a man who's not willing to pay the cost, you're like, well, that's not redemption.
Yeah.
And you see this picture of Boaz doing that. And again, it's just like this is one little string, one little object lesson that then ties into, well, Jesus paid a way big cost
Oh yeah.
for
Right.
us that
Right.
was to no real benefit to him. He was self-content, self-satisfied as the second person of the Trinity. It's like, what do you need to save us for? It's like
Yeah.
he didn't have to.
Yeah.
But as a redeemer, he took the sacrifice to no benefit to himself. So
It's the reminiscent of John when Jesus is like, there is a good shepherd, and the
Yeah.
good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Other shepherds will not lay their lives down. They
Yeah.
will run away from the threat. They'll run away from animals and thieves and whoever else. But the good shepherd will
Right.
lay down their life for the sheep.
That's right.
And that's what I am. I'm a
Yeah.
good shepherd.
And there's so much there too, just in if you want to be a redeemer, if you want to be a replica of the redeemer in somebody's life, you've got to stop asking the question, what's in it for me? You just got to stop asking that question. There's going to be loads of moments in the Christian life where God wants you to replicate what he's done for you, and that's going to require you to do something that may not benefit you or have anything to do with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And I just think if we want to be like Boaz, that's the key requirement here. Am I willing to to exert energy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing to pay the cost, to bear the burden for somebody else that it's like the widow mom down the street, who's
Mhm.
trying to take care of kids? She has nothing to do with my family. It's like, my family's fine. We're over here. We're 3 doors down. And it's like, but am I willing to be a Boaz-like redeemer and be like, okay, where and how can I pay a cost
Yeah.
that will benefit her, even if it doesn't benefit me?
Right.
So if
Mow
you-
a lawn, babysit, take a
Totally.
meal. Yeah, there's
all those are
different ways.
minor rehearsals of redemption.
Yeah.
You know? So,
That's
yeah.
beautiful.
I love that. Okay, now sandals are coming off.
Yeah.
They're not fighting, but
They're going
it
to
feels
slap
like
each
it.
other
This
with
This is one of
sandals.
the moments we talked about in the introduction of
Yeah.
like, what is happening?
There's cultural moments you read, you're like, I don't know what that's about. So
Yeah.
it is nice. There is some. It's like now this was a custom in former times. Okay, that they are exchanging a sandal to give it to the other. So the author does give us a little bit of like, hey, it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And again, we're still so far removed from it. We know
Totally.
sandals as weapons, perhaps, to throw at people.
Throw a sandal.
What's that meme going around where people are hitting each other with tortillas?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I
that's
want
kinda
to
what
do that.
We should start a new fad.
Old
Yeah.
Navy flip flop.
That's slap each
They're
other.
making promises with sandals. What's happening?
Yeah, what's happening here?
Yeah,
Doctor.
So, you think back in Genesis when God first promised Abraham the land, one of the first commands he told him to do was walk over it. So, essentially, inheritance is wherever your feet touch, right? And so sandals are on your feet. You're kind of connecting it there. So there is a connection with inheritance here, right? It's like wherever my shoes are, this is my inheritance. This is my, this is my ground.
Whatever the land, what is it? Whatever the light touches, right? When Mufasa tells him
that's
that.
right, that's
So
right.
this is wherever your sandals walk.
Yeah. There's an extra biblical example where the king of Assyria says that he has thrown his sandal over another country.
Okay.
And what he's basically saying is, it's mine. I walk it. It's my ground. So sandals here are connected to ownership
Okay.
of an inheritance.
Okay.
And what the man is giving up is he's giving up his obligation of inheritance to continue inheritance. So he's in disobeying the Lord to do what he should do as a kinsman redeemer. He's essentially being depossessed of his I guess his inheritance getting repossessed here in a sense. It's almost that symbolism where he's giving up his right to giving up the greater good here. He's giving up the greater gift of inheritance. So there's that the sandal is a symbol of that Abrahamic theme of walk the land and wherever your feet touches, that's your ground, that's your inheritance.
Okay.
So that symbol kind of, it's like me pulling off a shoe and like, here, you can have my house, and giving you that shoe as a symbol of I'm giving up in my inheritance in
Yeah.
a sense. So that man does it. It's kind of a Esau red stew moment.
I was just about to ask you that. Should I
Yeah.
think at all of Esau who sold his birthright
Yeah.
because he was like, I just need soup,
Yeah,
but ultimately didn't value the birthright the way Jacob did.
that's right.
And that this guy is devaluing and ultimately disobeying. Because when I read it, I just thought it was like, you have this cool option to redeem this. And he's like, nah, I
Yeah.
can't. But there's a lot more than a guy who just, this is inconvenient. He's actually taking he's not doing the right thing, not doing
Yeah.
the thing that God would command him to do.
Yeah, he's obviously liquid enough to be able to buy the land. Like when
Yeah.
it's just the land, it's like, I'll buy it. He didn't, like money's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's that
Responsibility,
added
no
responsibility.
thanks.
That's right. He wants
Okay.
the wealth, but no responsibility. And that leads to this transaction where he's giving up his heritage right to be a redeemer like Yahweh, to perpetuate Elimelech's land. And so he's giving up his inheritance in many ways
Yeah.
for the sake of protecting his possessions. I mean, this is just that. This is just that rich young ruler moment. Like, leave it
Yeah.
and redeem. You like do something that the Lord wants you to do. And
Yeah.
he, I almost want to add a verse in here that says, "And the man went away sad because he
Yeah.
had a lot of land." You
Yeah,
know, you know?
right.
It's
Yeah.
almost like you want to add that. And so this guy, again, no name,
The
not
one we don't speak of.
the one he who must not be named. You know, he's willing to redeem, to get wealthy, but not willing for the responsibility that God calls him to, and he ends up giving up his inheritance to Boaz, who is willing to do that. He who has been given a lot will be given more. You know, you kind of see
Yeah.
that, like, he who's faithful with much will be given more. Boaz has been faithful with the things that he has. He's willing to be faithful again, and so he acquires even more inheritance here with this as he's perpetuating Elimelech's inheritance. So
That's incredible. So they tell the witnesses. He's like, they agree, the sandal. Then they tell all the elders and all the people, your witnesses, that this is what they're doing. That he's acquiring, he's taking from Naomi everything. He's also taking Ruth to perpetuate the name of the dead so that they're not cut off. Is there a, it seems like there's a contrast between the guy whose name isn't used because he did something wrong.
right.
And just the emphasis of the name. Like what gets emphasized here is like, we don't want their name to be cut off
Right. Yeah.
from the people. Like, so there's a guy who's not named because he was disobedient. And then there's names that get perpetuated and redeemed and not forgotten forever.
That's right. And that's because somebody was kind enough to make that happen. There's a hesed moment here. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, I don't know if Kilion and Mahlon were their real names. You know, like was Naomi mean enough to actually name them sickly and frail? But
frail.
you know, either way, we know their name. They have names associated with them, which
Right.
means they weren't forgotten,
Yeah.
and they weren't forgotten because of Boaz's kindness. Man, I love these. I love watching movies where maybe the dad dies in battle. And the dad's best friend then adopts the son and is like, I'm going to tell you about your dad all the time. It's like this kind of, that kindness of just like, I'm not going to let your dad's memory fade. And Boaz steps in that. It's like, I'm not going to let Elimelech, Mahlon, Kilion die and be forgotten. And you do, again, have this picture of a redeemer who's not just concerned with the living, but also with the dead. And Jesus, who's a redeemer, who's Lord of the living and the dead. It's like Boaz got a concern for both. And he's being kind to both.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah. I do think, I want to point out, like, there's some big themes here. We've been talking about that Abraham theme, and we've been talking about the Exodus theme. I pointed this out, I think, before, but you just look at some of these weird phrases like this. You are witnesses of the day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Kilion and Mahlon. Also, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. And you're looking at that and you're like,
Right.
mail order brides?
Right, yeah.
It's just kind of like,
Yeah,
it's
Doesn't
kinda,
feel good.
yeah, it doesn't feel good. There's two words here for bought here. One would be the goel, I have redeemed. And then the bought when it comes to Ruth is kana. This is the only place in the Hebrew scriptures where a man is ever said to have bought a wife, right? Oftentimes you hear the Hebrew for I've taken a wife or I have, So this is the only place that a Hebrew man is said to have bought a wife. And again, you got to ask that question. When you begin to see that, it's like, this is not typical language. Again, it does help to have some Hebrew sources that you can read this in commentaries or whatever. It's like, this is not a
You're our
typical
source,
way.
That's what this podcast is.
That's
Your Hebrew source.
Don't take my word for it. I mean, just read all kinds of but this is not a normal way to describe a marriage moment like this until you begin to realize that there's only there's a verbal complex going on. A verbal complex is any time that you take two verbs and they kind of come together. I think of when you take the Hebrew word abad and shamar, right? So abad and shamar is to work and keep. So God puts Adam in the garden to work and keep the garden. He also puts the priests in the temple to abad and shamar, to work and keep, right?
Okay.
So anytime you see that verbal complex, abad and shamar, work and keep, you immediately get priestly connotations. It immediately paints a priestly
Yeah, I do.
contour to
I
that.
instantly get that.
I know that.
Yeah.
Locked in the vault.
Thanks, Justin.
Did you, I can't tell if you're joking.
I'm totally joking. I have no
Okay,
idea.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. There's just a verbal complex like that.
Yeah.
Another one would be take and give. Where Eve takes the fruit from the tree and she gives it to her husband. Take and give together. In Genesis, Sarai takes Hagar and gives Hagar to Abraham. And again, you're just getting fall connotation here. So verbal complexes work like that. That's how Hebrew language works, where it creates these it connects words that immediately, like if I were to say the words, come and take it.
Yeah.
Like it's just a random phrase, but you're immediately thinking of
Cannons fighting
that's right,
the last
Texas.
stand.
the Alamo.
Come and take that.
Yeah,
Right.
if you are a Greek nerd, you're thinking Molan Labe. You're thinking the whole 300 moment where the Spartans fight off the Persians too, because that's the first place where that phrase was used. So anytime you say "come and take it," you're thinking of the stand of the 300 Spartans. You're thinking of the Alamo, and you're just thinking of you see it in a flag, and you're like, okay, that's a fighter, right?
Right, right.
So that's how Hebrew works. Well, in this one, it's goel and kana, redeem and acquire. Only happens 3 times in the Old Testament. Happens here in Ruth 4, happens in Exodus 15, and it happens in a psalm that's I can't remember off the top of my head, that also speaks of the Exodus.
Okay.
So in these 2 texts, in Exodus 15 and in the psalm, redeem and acquire is speaking specifically of what God did for his people. He redeemed them and he acquired them to himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, it's like, okay, this is the only time that's used of a man and a wife. And there's only 3 instances this kind of verbal complex is used in the Hebrew scriptures. And you begin to be like, what is the author trying to do?
Right.
He's trying to show that Boaz has been a Goel redeemer, which is what God is in the Exodus.
Right.
And that Boaz has redeemed and acquired Ruth like God redeemed and acquired his people as his own possession. So there's a huge Exodus moment there with that verbal complex. Again, that's probably deeper than most people would want to go, but I think normal readers can get there when they're like, bought a wife. Gosh, that's so icky, so weird. You should be suspicious and curious at that moment of like, is that what he's trying to say? Should I,
Right.
am I judging this too quickly or am I missing something here? Because I had that moment where I was like, bought a wife. I've never heard. I had read through the Old Testament for years and years and years, never heard it. And I didn't know Hebrew at that time. It was like, I've never heard of a man buying a wife like this, So it just left me scratching my head. And that head scratching moment led to this realization that there's a verbal complex here that's showing the Exodus. One other theme is the Abraham theme here. And it's amazing. It's like he wants you to see the Abraham moment. And I pointed out because it really shows where Ruth and Boaz have come, like where the story has come. Look at the people's blessing. We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house. Notice that it's at this moment, like she's called Ruth the Moabite in verse 10. She's never again called Ruth the Moabite. After her marriage to Boaz. Her marriage to Boaz changes the identity. And so does all covenant relationships with a Redeemer.
Yeah.
The moment we get into a covenant relationship with our Redeemer, there's a new name change. Like Scripture talks about how there's a name that Christ gives us. So there is this moment where the old name fades away. Jacob lost his name in a covenant. He wasn't Jacob anymore. He's Israel after his covenant moment. So Ruth is no longer Ruth the Moabite. She's the woman who's coming into your house. And look who they compare her with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. And the house of Israel always has a dynastic, kingly kind of contour to it. So they're connecting her with the patriarchs, but they're also pointing ahead that Ruth is going to be someone who's going to be a house builder with Israel. Like she's going to, how is God going to build up his house in Israel? Well, it's through Ruth, who's on par with Rachel and Leah. I mean, this is, again, it's...
She's being brought into the most important family so far in the nation of Israel. It's like, may you be like these, like not just one woman, but 2 of these women who had 12 sons.
That's right.
Under their names, who built up the whole nation. Like a foreigner is now being brought into the family as high and as close as you can get.
Right. This would be like someone listening to one of my sermons and saying, may you be like John Piper and, Tim Keller. I'd be like, my name doesn't even deserve to be in the same sentence. But her name is in the same sentence as Rachel and Leah because of just because of that's who she is now. She's bearing that kind of importance in the story of redemption history.
Yeah.
That's the power of redemption. Like having a selfless kind, somebody's like rightly positioned Goel is going to take you to places that you would have never otherwise had any business being.
Right.
That's
right.
That's that's him taking, in
being
Hannah's
called up
song
to
and in
it.
Mary's
This is your
Yeah,
Magnificat. He takes the lowly and puts him with princes. Like,
totally.
that's what's happening to Ruth.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other comparisons here with the patriarchs. May your house be like the house of Perez. That's the son of Judah, whom Tamar bore to Judah because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So again, it's like remember what Ruth is trying to do. It's trying to build a bridge, right? So you get all these really cool stories about the patriarchs and the matriarchs in Genesis, right? You get Rachel and Leah and Tamar. You get Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You get all of them, and you get the Exodus, and then you get King David. And it's like, okay, how do we go from these amazing moments to this?
Right.
And Ruth is using these themes to show how naturally redemptive history on-ramps onto David's kingship. David's kingship is really just an offshoot of the story's already in progress.
Yeah.
And David's kingship, which happens because of this Ruth and Boaz moment, is all because God is using what's happened before and continuing it in the lives of really ordinary people.
Yeah.
Really ordinary people.
Yeah. Doing ordinary things.
That's right. Yeah.
Just working and living.
That's right.
Getting married.
Yeah.
Is this why he mentions, is this why the author mentions Judah specifically? Because
Yeah.
David's going to come from Judah. And so
Yeah.
the line here goes from Rachel, Leah, then to Judah.
Yeah. If the authors are Samuel, Gad, and Nathan, then they would want to connect that it was Genesis 49 that we get the prophecy of a lion from the tribe of Judah who would reign.
Yeah.
The scepter wouldn't depart from his feet, and all the nations would pay tribute to him, and his reign would bring this garden-like peace where he ties his donkey to the vine, which basically he's so abundant, he doesn't care where he parks his donkey. He can park it right next to the best wine vine, and it's fine. So they're if you're reading in the context, which I think we should read this way, they're reading in the context of Genesis 49. They immediately see Judah's like, oh, wait a second. There's a hint here of what's about to happen.
Yeah.
In Boaz and Ruth's marriage and what's going to happen, something similar with what happened to Tamar and Judah, through whom came the promise of a king.
Yeah.
Right? So we're all just getting set up for David, who's about to come. And again, I think it's the most beautiful aspect about all of this is I think when you get to Ruth 4, I think you can appreciate what Boaz has done. I think you can appreciate the bridge building between the patriarchs and the ex. I think all that's great. But I think the thing that's always stuck out to me the most is just how transformative redemption is.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a totally different Ruth in many ways than what you read in Ruth 1. It's not like she's a different person, but her situation, her name, even her own understanding of who she is, Naomi's understanding of who Ruth is changes here. Like this is one of those moments where you begin thinking this side character, no, actually they're the main character,
Yeah.
And Ruth gets a main stage moment as a Moabite widow and becomes the wife of Boaz and is mentioned in the same sentence as the matriarchs of Israel. And that's just an amazing moment.
We love a Cinderella story.
Right.
And Ruth is the biblical Cinderella. I mean, she
Absolutely.
has gone from less than nothing, terrible circumstances, nothing is going to go right.
That's right.
She's wildly humble and faithful, servant-hearted.
Yeah.
She's been through all this pain, right? And still somehow has this heart of gold, like Cinderella does, all this mistreatment. And in the end, is seen by the person who matters. And now at the end of the story, she has been put in the highest places that she could be put. And everything is different.
Yeah.
Her whole future is different. Everything is different now.
Totally. Yeah. And how we see her changes by this point too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, man, she's the hidden diamond in the story. It's like, it's that moment where it's just you finally find out who the real jewel is here.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. So
Now here's the now this is in literary terms, right? We've had our rising action. The most amount of tension is Boaz gonna marry Ruth? Yes, he is. So that's like the climax of the story, and now we're gonna go to the falling action. All you literary people, that's for you. Use your literature schools and use your literature tools in your Bible.
Go back to 12th grade English.
So go back to 12th grade. Where's the climax? Where does it fall off? And here it is. And we hear the rest of the story that Ruth has a baby Then the women say to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord." So we are back to now blessing the Lord, when before it was the Lord was against me.
Yeah.
And they bless the baby, like who is with Naomi to be all of these things to her.
Yeah.
Like incredible blessings said about all these people.
Yeah. Yeah. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife, and he went into her, just basically means they went on their honeymoon. And the Lord gave her conception. That's one of the very few, we see the Lord's at 4, the Lord gave her conception. And again, putting it in the context of matriarchs, like this happened to Sarah, this happened to Rachel, this happened
Yes.
to Rebecca, where they were barren and the Lord gave them conception. But again, it's like, remember, Ruth was infertile for 10 years in her marriage to Mahlon, like 10 years of no child. So I don't know what the stories of the listeners are for sure, but if you've ever been in this moment of like, oh my gosh, it's like this is never going to be a moment. God could change your reality like that. Doesn't mean he always will.
Right.
But in this moment, it's he's changing her reality because of the bigger picture that's being played out. This son has to be born in order for David to be king eventually, right? So God blesses their union with her conception. She gives birth to a son, and that son really does come to Naomi. Verse 16, then Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. And that's coming full circle into this. It's like, I went away full and I came back empty. Well, she's full again.
Yeah.
Right. So God never leaves his people empty handed. It's just, the prosperity gospel gets it wrong when it makes a promise that God will fill you up in this life. Like you pray, you have enough faith, and he'll fill your arms with the good things like now. I'm actually not against the prosperity gospel in an extended form. Like eventually, like that's where everything God does fill the arms of his people. Just may not be in the way that you think.
Back to that. Yep.
Yeah. Just be patient, and that's the biggest thing is like God never leaves his people empty-handed. Redemption always fills the arms of his people. It's just a matter of time and when God decides he wants to do it. So
I love what you said about too, God can change something in an instant. There's a way that when something goes on for so long, when waiting goes on for so long, when suffering goes on for so long, when there haven't been answers, there's a way to resign to that and just say, this is how it will be forever.
Yeah.
And it won't be different. And to guarding our hopes and trying to soothe our pain by protecting ourselves against anything changing or being better. We're just trying to make ourselves feel better. So it can be like, I'm going to put this period here, and every way that I look for, this is all that it's going to be.
Yeah.
And God will show off sometimes. Like, you don't know how fast. He changes things so fast.
That's right.
But it takes a lot of faith to hold it more open.
Right.
And to not just, it feels easier to just resign to darkness and despair and say, this is how it will always be. My name is Mara.
Totally.
Nothing will be different. We'll just
That's
die
right.
here in the dark.
Yeah.
But to say, it is really bad and this
Yeah.
is really hard.
That's right.
But I think that God can still do something, and
He
I don't
can.
know how long it'll take, and I don't know how he's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he can change anything as fast as he wants to.
That's
and
right.
he hasn't given up on us, but
That's
it might
right.
take a while for anything to change.
Like even a step further with that, it's like he's promised he will,
Yeah.
It's like God, God's answer to my needs may not come in the form of a mansion or a new car or lots of money. It will come in every spiritual blessing from the heavenly places.
That's right.
Ephesians 1, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. Our arms aren't empty.
That's right.
And whatever emptiness we currently feel at that moment, to have that courageous faith, like you're mentioning, that courageous faith to say, infertility, death, cancer, these things are all temporary.
Yeah.
They're all temporary in the grand scheme of God's redemption. It won't always be this way. Your child who has special needs and will never walk in this lifetime, it won't always be that way.
Yeah.
Those words do not deserve to be said from the mouth of a Christian. You're right. It's like we believe that. I have a tattoo that says, at the sound of his roar, we shall have spring again. It's like there's that kind of faith.
Yeah.
It's like God will turn things back to blessing
Mm-hmm.
after being in exile. He will redeem.
Yeah.
So,
I felt that I had shared last episode my story of infertility, but one of the things that that held my faith, and in some ways I just dare. It felt like a dare
mm-hmm.
in that season was, you will redeem these losses in this life or next, or you're a liar. And then it just made me go, well, he's not a liar. So I don't know what this looks like, but the tenacity of faith, to be encouraged by Ruth and Boaz and their story, that they lived a deep darkness in chapter 1, one that was hopeless and beyond their control. They did not have control over who could redeem them and what was going to happen with their story.
Yeah.
And the fast change that happened within just a few months in this small story, again, reminds us you could be in chapter 1, 1.5, and even 2.
Yeah.
But here's one little story where you get to read the end.
Absolutely.
And we already know the ultimate end.
Yeah.
In the end,
Right.
everything gets redeemed.
That's right.
To a level that even all your suffering you can't even compare them. Like Paul is saying, all of these momentary light afflictions
Mm-hmm.
are producing a weight of glory
That's right.
that can't even be compared. That there is a way that God will bring about redemption, restoration, that Jesus will bring that in such a way that if I were to compare all my losses and sufferings in this life to the glory that he brings, I would be like, there's more glory in comparison to what I lost.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, this is overwhelmingly more than what I went through.
Right.
That there's a generous outpouring of fullness that's like, comparatively, my loss is small compared to what he just did. That he can do it. That he'll do it in the end in a way that we will just praise him. Like, it'll be magnificent. It won't be like, you didn't make it worth it. It will be so worth it. I think we'll just be like, I am shocked that you're doing this for us.
And on that day, it won't be any doubt who did it. I mean, the women who are looking at Naomi smiling with this little baby in her arm, they're not like, oh, Naomi, look at what you did when you told your daughter to go pimp herself out. It's like they know that none of this has happened because Naomi was strategic enough to come back home, or strategic enough with the threshing floor moment. They know, blessed be the Lord.
That's right.
Who has not left you without a
I love the
redeemer.
community piece that's brought at the very end,
Yeah.
just the celebration, I can just hear the giddiness, of them. And you could almost be like, Ruth's like, I just had this baby. And Naomi's like, it's mine. All the babies are like, look how cute it is, it's just so fun to think about just baby showers and what the community of God does to celebrate the moments that God provides. And
I like that it's the community that names God in this, because God's name is throughout the book of Ruth, but it does feel behind the scenes and passive, but a lot more realistic to how I experience my life. Like, I do want the sky to split open and God to say something to me. Like, I want like these things to crash into my reality. But the everyday part of my life is like, He is present and very much moving in the mundane. A lot of times I miss it. But he moves in a way that on my side of reality, it feels like behind the scenes. And it's actually people who will be the ones who are like, hey, the Lord did that.
Yeah.
Like, they're the ones who observed. Did you see what just happened?
Yeah.
That was totally him. And so my community at times is the tangible, like, if I can't see, feel, hear, or sense God, a lot of times my bemoaning is like, God, where are you?
Yeah.
And the solution is like, go talk to Jan about how you're feeling. She's going to give you a hug, and she's going to listen to you.
Yeah.
She's going to remind you about who God is. And that's actually him.
right.
Like, him
Yeah.
being present to me right now through people.
So
That
good.
he's near and that he hugs, that he celebrates. And it's people are the ones who like lift my eyes up to be like, you see what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
he's doing something. You're aware. Just
Yeah.
want to make sure you're aware. And we can do that lovingly for
We
others.
have to.
good.
To
I
be
have
like,
to have that.
I know that this seems bad, but he hasn't left you. He hasn't left you. He won't leave.
Amen.
I know this is chapter 1, but 4 will come.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
More
right.
will come.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're not quite done, right, with chapter 4. There's just a tail end that the Bible nerds in us couldn't just leave it. Yes, we have one whole episode on a teeny tiny genealogy.
That's right.
So that's what you have to look forward to, is an episode on genealogy, but you're going to love it, okay? There's a baby, but now we need to find more about this baby. Thanks for joining us, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Yep.